On February 17th, 1988, Mr. Brom indicated to a friend that he was going to kill his family. On February 18th, 1988, Mr. Brom telephoned another friend and stated that he had killed his family.
If you've lived in Rochester long enough, you've heard the name.
This is him on his way to prison. This is the last time Rochester saw him.
Brom. You've probably read the headlines.
5 lives that are gone. I mean, they're literally gone.
Remember the reports?
The question Olmsted County authorities must decide now is whether to charge David Brom as a juvenile or as an adult.
And watch the Brom family murder story play out on national television.
Good evening. Topping tonight's News 11. Police charge a 16-year-old boy with 4 counts of first-degree murder after his family is found axed to death in their Rochester home.
Patty Price lived it.
It was a crazy, awful experience.
In the middle of the night on February 18th, 1988, 16-year-old David Brom killed 4 of his family members. His parents, Bernard and Paulette, and younger siblings, 14-year-old Diane and 9-year-old Rick, all murdered with an axe.
And you heard correctly. A 16-year-old who murders his entire family with an axe will have the opportunity for parole. You can't make it up. Now, he was sentenced to 4 life sentences. He shouldn't have a chance at freedom, but because of new law saying that it's unconstitutional to sentence someone, even an axe murderer, even someone who murdered their entire family, it's unconstitutional to keep them locked up for life. Now, the way that Minnesota law works, it's different than other states. He's already been paroled from 2 of his life sentences, and now he has 2 remaining. So this hearing is to see whether he'll get parole from his 3rd life sentence. I want to point out that this is just one of those cases that I think shock common sense, that shock really the senses of how is it possible that someone who could commit such a crime can be walking amongst us soon. But we're going to watch the hearing. I'll unpack it with all the details at the end. But what I do want to ask you while you're watching this is see if you can find the empathy, if you can find the humanity, if there's any emotion given by this axe murderer. Now with that, let's jump in.
We're here today to review Mr. David Brom, who is present by video at the Minnesota Correctional Facility in Lino Lakes. Mr. Brom also has his advocate and friend, Mr. Paul Welker, present on the screen as well. Here with me at the Minnesota Department of Corrections Central Office is our Commissioner and Chair of the Supervised Release Board, Mr. Paul Schnell, along with board members Christine Bray, Cheryl Ramstad, Jody Nelson, juvenile expert member Jody Nelson, juvenile expert member Donald Strufert, Andrew Larson, and we also have our newest board member present by video observing today. Our records indicate that on February 18th, 1988, a deputy of the Olmsted County Sheriff's Department entered the Braum residence. The officer found 4 deceased victims, Bernard, Paulette, Diane, and Richard Brom. The victims had been killed by repeated blows with a heavy, sharp object. A blood-stained axe was found in the home. On February 17th, 1988, Mr. Brom indicated to a friend that he was going to kill his family. On February 18th, 1988, Mr. Brom telephoned another friend and stated that he had killed his family. On October 15th of 1989, David Francis Brom was sentenced to 4 counts of first-degree murder in Olmsted County District Court. Sentence number 1 and 4 remain concurrent, and Mr. Brom was paroled from those sentences on January 16th of 2007. Sentence number 2 started on January 17th of 2007, and Mr. Brom was paroled from this sentence on May 21st of 2022. Mr. Brom is currently serving sentence number 3. This is a 17-year life sentence, and his parole eligibility date was originally September 23rd of 2037. Due to legislation regarding individuals who were juveniles at the time of their offense, Mr. Brom now has the opportunity to be reviewed by the Supervised Release Board after serving a minimum of 30 years. Today's review represents Mr. Brom's second juvenile offense review after serving approximately 36 years of incarceration. This includes his credit of 605 days given by the courts. Given the changes by the legislature regarding juvenile offense cases, Mr. Brom is eligible to be considered for parole as of February 17th, 2018. Thank you. I turn this matter over to the board. Commissioner.
Good afternoon, Mr. Brom. How are you today?
I'm good, thank you.
I would like to start out, you've been through this before, start out by asking you to tell the board what it is you'd like to see happen as a result of today's meeting.
I'd like to walk away from today's meeting with an understanding of what a step down process might look like for me.
Can you talk about your readiness, your journey, what led you to here, and the extent to which and how that, in your view, readied you for being considered for parole?
What led me to this point in my life?
Yeah, and your readiness, if you for parole as you've described.
Okay. Yeah. So I've kind of spent my time the best that I can to change the things about my life that led me to the despair and the decisions that I made and the actions that I took, the crimes that I committed. I tried to change everything that I could about myself. And I believe that through the help of staff, programs, the support system I have in my life, I'm a good example of what a transformation can look like in a person's life through the Department of Corrections. I think that I've demonstrated consistency in that progress and in that maturing and growth, and I believe that I'm ready for parole.
So we've had a chance to talk about this in prior hearings, but I think it's, for purposes here, I think it's important. As you know, the gravity of this offense is immense. Not just the impact on your family, but the community, and as you say, the ripple effect over the course of time. But as you think about, can you help give a sense of understanding of, through the lens of today, what happened that could allow you to engage in the conduct and the taking the lives of your family members, as you look back now through the lens of experience and history and the range of experiences and services that you participate in? How do you understand what you did at that time?
Yeah. First, if I could just take a minute to talk about the effects of the crime on others. I'd just like to apologize to the family and friends of Bernard, Paulette, Diane, and Richard. I caused tremendous loss in their lives, incredible grief and pain, and left them with confusion and unanswered questions. And I apologize for that loss, for that grief, for the murders that I committed and the effect that it had on their life. I'd also like to apologize to the courts, the court officials, the sheriffs, who just as a matter of the service that they provide to their community, that they were a witness to the crimes that I committed. I apologize for the impact that that had on their lives. And lastly, to the neighborhood, to the churches to the church we attended, the schools we were enrolled in, and the community of Rochester. I apologize for the ripple effects of losing an entire family in such a horrific way. And to give an idea of what leads a person to commit the murders that I did, I struggled with depression for some time, and it had clouded my thoughts, and it clouded my my ability to process things. And I had grown to a short-sighted view that I thought these things were going to last forever. And I knew I couldn't live that way forever. And in the cloud of depression, I started to believe that other people were at fault for the way I felt. And unfortunately, that fault I placed on my parents and my family, because I was often more depressed at home than I was in other areas of life.
Hey, it's me. I have Brom in here for a comment.
When did
PAROLE.
when did you first start to get or gain a level of insight or clarity or an understanding of the depression? When did that begin to happen?
I started to understand a little bit about it when I was in the Oaks Treatment Center in Texas. That was a beneficial environment for me. They were supportive and encouraging, and but I really didn't grasp the effect that it was having on my life until it started to kind of dissipate. That cloud started to dissipate in my life as I pursued my faith and as I pursued the investments that other people were making in my life, probably closer to my early 20s.
Along the way, were there reconnections that you made with people who were significantly harmed by the offense?
Yeah, I've had connection with several family members, all four of my grandparents, some aunts and uncles, and my older brother. I've also had some contact with a friend of my sister's. So I have had, not all of those have continued, but I have had some interactions with people who were affected by the crimes I committed.
What was that like for you? And as you, especially like as those things were happening or occurring or were about to occur, what was the experience of that? What was that like?
It's always difficult to hear how painfully you've affected someone else's life. And so it was a difficult thing to hear, and to hear how it didn't end. The effects of the crimes didn't end after the funeral or after a short period of time, that they continue to feel the effects of loss and grief. It was also honestly sometimes difficult to hear their acceptance of me into their lives as I struggled to go through the journey of finding a way to forgive and accept myself. It was difficult sometimes to hear their forgiveness and acceptance of me.
As you think about and I asked that question not to do for any other reason than you've had transition and what you're seeking from the board is further transition. And all of the things that happen bring something new or different. What do you anticipate, or what would you expect if the board were to move you forward, or look at grant parole, whatever the board would choose to do? How do you feel like you would manage or be able to deal with that type of a transition as well, certainly you're not the person you were when you were 16 years old, but nonetheless, the offense is a reality. And how do you think you would manage that?
So, I mean, it's, with any challenge that I face, I believe I have a level of emotional maturity now in order to deal with and recognize what I'm feeling and to work through those emotions. And when that becomes a challenge to me, I have a very strong support system. And so I rely on the advice, counsel, and help of other people that are in my life. And they can usually speak to me in a way that's helpful. And going forward, I also know that I have resources in the community that are available to me that I can reach out to. I'm working with a couple peer recovery specialists and things of that nature. And lastly, I also have, when there's challenges that I face, I know I have a parole officer that I can turn to for help, and ultimately other corrections staff that I can turn to for help.
Do you you talked about the desire to talk about like what next steps would look like, and you've done a lot of different work around release planning, and have developed a pretty comprehensive one that we've looked at even prior to this meeting, during your previous meeting. Can you talk about what, just like what if you could write your ticket, what would that look like, and what would a good transition look like to David Braum?
If I could write my ticket, I'm not sure if that's what I would envision the board most likely deciding. I think is a more prudent conversation, but what I would think would be a good outcome would be for the board to tell me about how much time they would like me to serve here in minimum, to continue to show that I can work in the community in the way that I have been, and be productive in the work that I'm doing here and the transition that I'm making here. And then with the idea of possibly moving to a halfway house at some point in time, working at the bridge in the beginning of that halfway house as part of that transition, and then through the halfway house continuing to gain employment outside the bridge, outside the Department of Corrections, and continue to save money and work on building the support system that will make a successful transition into the community on parole.
Thank you for that. I think those are the primary questions I have. Others?
I don't know if this is a question, maybe it is a comment, but what I was struck with, Mr. Brom, in your story was the sense that in the time that you've spent incarcerated, that you not only made it through that experience, but you seem to have thrived in that environment from pretty early on. So many awards, education awards, so many programs completed, PPE, all the thing, you know, the mentoring, you were mentored immediately. And it just really struck me that what you perhaps didn't find in your own home or in school or in your community, you have found in prison. And I think just even as you're talking now, when Commissioner Schnell gave you the opportunity to talk about your vision, and you kind of talked about what's more prudent is what we're going to do. So I think maybe just something for you to think about moving forward is your own efficacy, your own decision-making. I think it's wonderful you've got the relationships and community that you do. And going forward, you'll be the decider at some point of what you're going to do. And just, I don't know, just a thing to have you think about. My background's in therapy and in school-based therapy. And I'm just sorry that your 16-year-old self did not get the treatment for the depression that you were experiencing. So I think you were failed in that regard.
Other questions, thoughts?
I may comment. I'm struck by the phrase, Commissioner, the reality of the offense. As a parent of a murdered daughter, I believe I share, or I've had view of that reality. Helpful for me has been the phrase, I got to do it myself, but I can't do it alone. I look for an opportunity to hook up with you, so to speak. What's been your experience of working together with other parents who are grieving because of the offense? Or what's been the experience of us dealing with that in the many opportunities you've taken and created with incarceration? How do we share, or how do we work together to deal with that reality? Bingo. Or how have you found what's working for you?
I really look at a restorative approach to it, a restorative justice approach to it, where I think sometimes just getting together and sharing your experiences and sharing the journey that you've had, the impacts that crime has had on your life, I think that can be an avenue towards healing and transformation in people's lives as they understand that their actions affect more than just their own life. Their actions affect the lives of others. Both positive and negative actions have ripple effects. And so I think sharing those stories, I think is beneficial toward healing.
Where have those opportunities been nurtured within the system? What have been some of the barriers for sharing those opportunities?
Some of the barriers to those opportunities just lie in the nature of incarceration is that you're separated. So there's not always an avenue for contact to be made. It's also difficult. A lot of times there's, and this is entirely up to a victim to have, but there are no contact orders, and sometimes the Department of Corrections wants a person to not have contact with surviving family members of victims. And that's always been an issue that I've addressed when I've been asked to sign paperwork that says I will not have contact with surviving family members of victims. So I can't sign that paperwork because I've been in contact with family members. So that's a challenge in the department. It's also a challenge, to be honest. There's a matter of accountability that it's always it can be a difficult thing to be accountable for the crimes you've committed, for the way that you've harmed other people. That can be extremely challenging personally to be fully accountable for that.
I understand that to be, or at least I think I face that. What's the criteria used to assess sufficient accountability? Big question in my mind yet.
For me, I look at accountability kind of one, accountability involves understanding the impacts of your actions, the crimes that you committed, understanding the ripple effects and the people's lives that you've harmed and how you've harmed them. So just one, gaining an understanding of that. I think another aspect of that accountability involves making apologies and doing your best to, if you can, repair the harm. And obviously, in my case, that you cannot repair certain harms, but to do your best to provide healing in other circumstances, in other areas where you can, giving back to communities in whatever way that you're able. And then thirdly, for me, accountability also involves recognizing the changes that need to be made in your life, looking at the things that led you to hurt people the way you did, to take the lives that you did, and making the changes in your life that need to be made in order that does not repeat.
I concur, and I appreciate, and I think I've found healing and strength in all of the above as well. I guess I would add one more. I think at times, as you mentioned, there are opportunities or maybe need to change some of the system criteria or policies or opportunities for victim and offenders to dialogue and to meet and to interact. A lot of fear, a lot of unknown, a lot of yet to be determined things are I think, getting in the way is my view. But I appreciate your efforts, and it looks like you've made great success in that along the way, and my hat's off to you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Just a reminder that the camera is over here.
Just so
Sorry.
you know, Mr. Brom, there are screens across from people, and so they may not be looking at you. They're looking at a screen. So just so you're aware.
I appreciated being eye to eye with you and realize you are not eye to eye to me.
Yeah. Can I just ask one question about, you did the clinical pastoral education program, and if you can maybe describe that a little bit, in the peer recovery specialist training, and then what or how those things might apply to your future, whatever that looks like.
The clinical pastoral education was an opportunity to take part in it's a master's level program. It's a chaplain internship, and the class that I participated in involved the teachers and the instructors coming in to the prison in Stillwater, along with 3 or 4 chaplain interns from the community, and then usually 3 or 4 inmates that were also at that point interning as chaplains in the prison. And we would take the classes together and listen to lectures. And the main thrust for me of the clinical pastoral education was just deeply listening to people, and not just listening to respond, but listening to hear the stories that they're telling, And then also listening for, a lot of times there's a lot of tragedy and trauma and hurt that people share in their stories, and listening for the examples of strength and victory over those experiences. And so for me, chaplaincy really involved listening deeply to people. And there's a narrative therapy aspect to it that involved specifically listening for areas of success and ways that you can bring about that awareness that they do have more strength than probably they realize they have. The peer recovery dealt more with, instead of spiritual issues, dealt more with substance use issues. And it had an approach that was similar. They used a thing called motivational interviewing, and it's somewhat similar to narrative therapy, except it involves more active listening and focuses on questions that lead towards change and moving a person towards greater access to change in their life. And the mentorship program in St. Cloud, I'd also like to mention that dealt a lot more with the mental health aspect of things. So I felt like I really had a good, after that program, I really felt like I had a good, well-rounded understanding of how to deal with people in crisis, whether it be through spiritual means, through recovery, or through mental health issues. I felt like it really made me well-rounded in that aspect. And as far as in the community goes, I look forward to an opportunity to connect with either a recovery community organization or a ministry or some nonprofit that deals with people who are in crisis or experiencing hard times, and being able to share the knowledge, the skills that I've gained over those classes with them.
Just last thing for me, I just would just say I appreciate you. I know that getting moved to St. Cloud was after being in a medium setting, it was a little bit of a shift, and going back, but I really appreciate the role that you played, and the challenge of kind of going back inside to a more close setting, and applying those skills in that setting. So I just want to acknowledge and also the updates that you provided were helpful and useful as well. So thank you for that.
I have a couple of questions actually. So, and some of this is a little bit of a follow-up to one of my colleagues and what she had asked. And so my question is largely kind of framed by like your experience from when you first came into prison at the age of 18 or whatever that was. Like your trajectory does not align with most, meaning came in, you did not see a lot of the disciplinary stuff. I mean, 37 years and you've had one violation for having too many people in your cell, I think is what I had read. That almost makes it harder for me to wrap my head around. So can you, to what do you attribute your success when prior to that you engaged in what in your packet is described as an incomprehensible offense? Does that question make sense?
It does make sense. I think, so first, I think that my record does not necessarily reflect the reality of my early incarceration. In the fact that while, I did not have discipline like many people have, I did have a somewhat poor attitude towards a lot of things. And so it demonstrated itself in a lot of times I just passed on opportunities that were available to me because I didn't think it was necessary if I'm going to spend the rest of my life in prison. So after getting my high school diploma, some of the staff wanted me to go to college because Pell Grants were offered back then. And I really didn't see any point in getting a college degree because I felt like I could get any job in prison without a college degree. And so I did have employment. I was employed. And so, but it doesn't necessarily demonstrate what was going on internally in me. And so I think my record is a little deceptive in that sense because I was struggling when I first came to prison. And it was mostly with hopelessness and some despair. One of the biggest things that did continue to move me towards transformation was my faith, which I encountered early in my sentence. And so that helped me. There were also staff who really invested in me that was an encouragement to not engage in fighting, drinking, drugs, not engage in those activities. There were staff who invested in me. I had friends who were strongly invested in me. I did not want to disappoint my grandparents after I had harmed them so much by continuing in destructive behavior. That was my grandparents visiting me. I didn't want to ever have to explain to them that I was in segregation for doing something that I shouldn't have been doing. And so that was a strong motivator for me as well early in my incarceration.
Have you, I think earlier you had talked about, at the time of the offense that you were really deeply mired in depression. Is that, and I think I had also read that you had gone to I'm assuming a mental health treatment program. I think it was in Texas or have you had ongoing behavioral health contact or is it, did the depression just kind of lift and now it's not something you struggle with anymore? Just kind of curious what that has been like for you.
It wasn't an overnight change in my life, but over the course of a few years, the people that came into my life that mentored me really helped challenge me to look at things differently, to challenge some of the thoughts that I had and not just accept negative views about what my future or what my life could look like. And so over time, it took some work, and some of the tools that I learned in Texas, while I didn't get to complete the work in Texas, some of the tools that I learned there and some of the support that I was given there helped navigate some of the emotions that I had going forward after Texas. So, and I have not had contact with ongoing contact with behavioral health other than through some of the programs that I participated in, but not in a counseling session. But early in my 20s, the depression did slowly lift from my life, and I was able to gain a more hopeful attitude towards my future and what life could look like.
Last one for me, and I apologize if I'm reading more into it than maybe I should, but I'm just I'm trying to wrap my head around all of this. So earlier, when you were kind of giving your opening statement, you indicated that you apologized to the family of, and that's your family. I'm just wondering, should I read anything into that phrasing?
It's a, so for me, I don't know if there's anything to read into that. I recognize that not everyone in my family would accept me today as family. And so I don't feel like it's appropriate in an apology to say to my family who I've harmed, because they may not be accepting of me as their family.
Okay. I appreciate that clarification.
Mr. Brom, I just want to follow up on some of the mental health issues you experienced early on, and you made a statement that you didn't feel the need to pursue additional support to address your mental health needs since your brother passed away in 2016. Could you talk a little bit about that? Why did that, what was it?
So when my older brother passed away, I felt a great deal of grief. And so I struggled with that grief for a couple of weeks. And I was considering contacting the mental health staff in Stillwater at that time. And my pastor came up to visit with me on that weekend that I was considering reaching out to the mental health staff. And we had a very helpful conversation about grief and loss. And I felt like I turned a page in that experience and in that journey through my conversation with my pastor. That was very helpful. And so after that visit, I didn't feel like it was necessary anymore to reach out to the mental health staff, because I felt like I had gotten what I needed from my conversation with my pastor.
You referenced the time that you spent in Austin, Texas, and the diagnosis you got there. Do you remember the diagnosis they gave you? It was depression. But then it went on to talk about schizoid paranoia and bipolar, things like that. And I think, and I don't know if that came from Texas specifically, it just in the report, it said somewhere along the line, or maybe that's my wording. It didn't specifically say where that diagnosis came from. But in your experience, it sounds like you don't experience voices or any of that. Could you just talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, I'm not sure early on where those diagnoses came from, because I have not experienced hallucinations or either auditory or visual. And so I'm not sure that the schizophrenic diagnosis is accurate. And the bipolar, I've not experienced those kinds of swings in my mood. So I don't understand where those diagnoses. I'm not certain what factors I had that made them come up with that diagnosis.
Do you think it was when you were at Austin?
There was a period of time early in my incarceration where I went through several different psychological evaluations with different psychiatrists. And I'm guessing that some of them came up with different diagnoses. I don't think my doctor in Texas was focused on evaluating me for diagnosis, but I'm not sure.
Do you see a need for mental health therapy going forward as you step down and leave?
Yeah, I do look forward to an opportunity to have conversations with a counselor as I step down, to just help sort out emotions that I might experience, challenges that I might face, just to have another network of support in my life.
Thank you.
Yeah. Go ahead.
In reading the information provided to me, I think you provided a lot of, you were seeing it, and you provided a lot of unique interactions, particularly with your, thank you. There we go. Hi there. Unique interactions with your fellow inmates. My brief encounter talking with those who are incarcerated, standing out and being more of an individual or having your own sort of notoriety can be a danger as much as a source of strength and pride. And can you talk a little bit about both sides of that? Of starting to being the unique health provider is the words I would use, but what are the blessings? What are the hardship with that?
The blessings is that I get to walk with people as they experience some real tragic moments in their life and provide an opportunity to hold hope out for them. And so that's one of the great honors and benefits of being able to provide some help and healing towards the men that I serve time with. Another benefit is I'm true to myself. I'm true to ultimately how I was raised. And there's something empowering in being who you are and not trying to be fake. And there's something freeing in being who you are. The challenges are, it's heartbreaking to watch other people just continue to destroy their own lives, continue to destroy other people's lives. It's painful to watch people struggle with addiction and mental health and not reach out for assistance and not reach out for any kind of change or progress in their life. There's a challenge in peer pressure to go with the crowd when the culture is about violence and a predatory violent nature. There's a challenge of dealing with peer pressure there. But all of those things have kind of made me stronger, and I think also in a sense more sensitive to the struggles that I've witnessed other people experience in their lives.
Thank you. Thank you.
I'm going to open it up to Mr. Welker. I just want to say thank you for being here today. We really appreciate it. And I would just like to open the floor to you to speak to your sense of where Mr. Braum is at and any other thoughts you have for the board.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it and appreciate being part of this. Yeah, I was just reflecting and thinking when I first started seeing David, I was 29 years old. I'm 63. I know him. I know him very well. I've seen a lot of growth. He's the finest man I've ever met. He's grown. He's very. He's got a gift of encouragement. I guess I'll say it that way. And it's been a real blessing to be a part of his life and be with him on the journey.
Can you describe just the connection and how this came to be?
Yeah. So David was a friend of another inmate who was incarcerated at the time in St. Cloud, and they were pretty close. And then and I was visiting this other inmate at the time, he got transferred to Faribault, and he thought that it'd be good if I could begin seeing David and encourage Dave in his time. And so that started in I'm going to say summer of 91. And that's how we got connected. It was through another inmate that I was seeing at the time.
When you say that you witnessed considerable change in him over the course of time, what are some of the notable changes that you did observe in that span of time?
Yeah. Well, I think I just saw him grow emotionally. He has learned a lot of skills on how to deal with different emotions, how to identify how actions are coming from those feelings, and those feelings come from thoughts, and those thoughts come from the heart. And so he's learned a lot about who he is, and he's learned a lot about how to identify issues more clearly, get to the root of issues, and deal with those in constructive, positive ways. And over the years, he's gotten really, really good at it and has been able to share that with other people.
Excellent. Anyone else have questions for Mr. Walker?
What do you anticipate, Mr. Welkert, will be your relationship with him from this point forward? Should he be released at some point? What would you anticipate your involvement in his life, and how would you characterize that you anticipate your relationship would be?
Yeah, thank you for that question. That's a very good question. As I understand from David's perspective, he would like the relationship to continue. I would as well. I would anticipate it would. The gentleman I was referring to, who was an inmate that got me connected to David, was released in 1995, and he and I still have a relationship where we get together monthly. And we meet in Wilmer, Minnesota. We walk for a couple hours. We go out and have lunch, and we talk about where we're at in life and how I can be helping. And the mentorship kind of continues there in that relationship. So it's been, I don't know. I started seeing him in '87. So yeah, I'm still in this life 37 years later. I would anticipate a similar route with David, where I would meet regularly with him and be there for him whenever he needs me.
Thank you.
All right. With that, I'm gonna before I close the discussion and we begin deliberation, I want to just briefly open the floor to you, Mr. Braum, to make any final comments.
No, I appreciate the opportunity to talk with you, and I'm grateful for the questions that you've asked and the thoughts that you've provoked from me, and yeah, just look forward to hearing the results.
All right, thank you. At this time, I'm going to close the discussion. During board discussion deliberation, the board will not entertain questions or allow interruptions. And with that, I would open the discussion to the board.
I have a question regarding the piece in his release plan about meeting with the sheriff of Olmsted County and the prosecutors. When do you anticipate that happening? While he is still incarcerated to some degree, or once he's out on supervised release?
I've had just the preliminary conversations there, and I think it would be whenever they might be willing to do that. So that would just really be
either or.
It could be either or. It's just something that came up, I think, as a result of the community investigation originally.
I guess I'd like to see Mr. Brom on the track to parole, and I don't know the right language exactly. I mean, he's at Lino, right, minimum right now, so whatever the step down process is, I'd like to, I certainly think he's ready and like to see that happen. And I don't mean like fast track, like,
Right.
but he said earlier, I'd like to know what the path is going to be here. And I'd like to see him on it.
Just for context, so people know that when we had met with him, I met with him just over a year ago or so. We implemented that move to St. Cloud, and then I think it was just in December he was transferred back at the minimum because I had made the commitment at that time that he would go there for a year to work in as mentor and intake units. So he did that. So that's where he's at now. So it's just been, I don't even know if it's a month yet.
Correct. It was 12/3 that he got to minimum.
So just over a
And
month.
then probably started it not too long after that.
12/3 again, where?
He got to minimum
At what?
on December,
At
just the
Lino Lakes.
beginning
Lino
of
Lakes,
December.
okay, thank you.
Lino.
So move, if that is a motion, or I'm ready to go with what the next steps towards release, towards parole, initiate those in the most expedient way.
Well, clarification, do you mean like move him on from minimum and ICWIC as soon as possible, because he just got there? So I was struggling with, is it appropriate to, he's only been there a month, to then move him on? I think work release would be the next. So I just want clarity what the motion is.
Keep moving.
Yeah, clarity, he met his mark, the conviction mark is to the end of his sentence. That's been met a number of years ago already, right?
With the law change, yes.
Yeah, with the law change, it was 2018.
Okay. So the next, is there another date ahead of him, or one of our opportunities is to set that date?
We would set that date. That determination. I think the question really becomes, is, and I don't, this is all over the place, where if you look at step down, do we, what does it look like? How much time would we want him to be a minimum on a ICWIC crew? And I think part of this, and again, I'm not advocating for anything here other than I think part of the reality is, and we didn't ask Mr. Braum about this, but for a lot of people who've been incarcerated for a long time, even just that whole notion of all of a sudden you're cutting grass at park someplace for working for some city as on an ICWIC crew is a kind of a pretty crazy life change when you think about being locked up from, in this case, 16. And so that, and I'm not saying that, if we think about this, do you look at this through the lens of what does he need? I don't know that question. What do we feel comfortable with? I think it's a question of, is there a period of time that you'd like to see him there before he would move to work release? But this is entirely a board decision versus set by the minimum confinement.
Thank you.
I don't have any concern that he needs to stay any amount of time in minimum, given what he's done for 37 years and all the accomplishments and all the growth. I mean, the psychologist talked about notable and substantial growth. So I don't see a benefit of more time incarcerated. At the same time, I think your point, Commissioner, about, okay, this is a crazy change in life now, so I think if there's gradual movement, it's about get used to this. Okay, get used to this, and what does your support need to look like now? What's it need to look like now? But I don't see a benefit in prison programming or any of, like oftentimes we'll say, they need to do more programming. That's not the case here. He's done plenty.
Isn't one of the things that will come with his pursuing this work crew that he'll have access to money that he wouldn't have had before? And I think that given his being incarcerated from such a young age, managing that would be a challenge, would be something you'd have to learn, establishing some community connections. So I would see those steps as being toward his success on the outside, helping to build that. So could I amend the motion to say, deny parole, continue him in step down with the goal that he get to work release next, and maybe review, and I guess the question is how much time in his current, I would think 6 months at least before he moves to work release. So I'll put that motion forward.
So let me just make sure so we would be denying parole, continuing him. Well, I'll figure out what that is after, but we have 6 months. You would like to see 6 months in minimum before a transition to work release. Then the question is, I think it's either two questions can be approached either way. How long would you like to see him in work release, or when would the board like to see him come back? Because that either way, you're going to get to the same end. Do you want him to do a year in work release, 6 months in work release, or do you want to set it out to 18 months and that's 6 months in a minimum? Or he would actually spend a month there already. So you could, if you wanted to do something odd, do 17. That would be a year then a work release. So I think these are questions that would have to be refined.
The question I have, or the encouragement I would have in work release, I agree, it's more of the community supports the access to what's happening and that transition into the community. I believe that can be accomplished in 6 months. Or can you get anything more out of that than what's going to be available in 6 months or less? But it's that set up that connection with the community. I think work release then really opens that up. Whereas the minimum is just sort of a good ground to move into work release. So I'd say 6 months, or can you talk a little bit more about the opportunities for community interaction, community exposure?
While he's in work release, you're talking
While he's
about?
in work release?
I think that really can be somewhat dependent and in terms of things that we would want him to do, but it is intended to be a transition, just another transition. And one of the things that we had talked about when I had seen him a year ago or so, over that, was the whole notion that that a lot of people at his age would have had a lot of movements, experiences with transitions, and so that was one of the reasons for even transitioning him back to St. Cloud. And so that was a part of that thinking. So I guess in terms of work release, I think we have had people in work release for long periods of time. Generally, that year is kind of where we don't like to go super longer than that, because that could be really challenging for folks. And we've had people go less than that. And the hard part here is that, we decide this, it's not based upon some measures, right? That the work release staff are looking at. So if you were saying do 6 months on work release, and bring them back, that's a possible, and then there could be an evaluation of, does he need to do additional time in that? You could do a paper review, and by paper review, ask work release to submit documentation as to what they see, and then the board could just do that paper review and then decide, do you want to bring them back in the next month or two? I mean, so this is really wide open.
the other opportunity I would hope is, or when would it be available, I guess is my question. He has provided services to other inmates and has been selected and placed at St. Cloud because of his capacities. What capacities or would that be new programs that he could be initiating in minimum now? He's got a lot to offer. I would like, how can those opportunities be available as well?
I think he will, just saying, but, I think the experience and the record is that he's done that where he's been, and so he would continue. And whatever that looks like in terms of even his description of whether it's, some type of chaplaincy or nonprofit work or crisis work, I don't know what the future looks like, but I think it sounds like that's a little bit of the direction he seems to be pursuing. And I think, what that looks like in a work release setting, I don't know. He talked a little bit about Bridge, and I think he's got a unique focus. If it's that kind of, the Bridge can be a really helpful thing in terms of job search skills and some of those sorts of things. I don't know, given his focus, if that's, the place to go for some of those things. That tends to be much more, focused on, on job search skills and job readiness and yet minimum, and ICRA can provide some of that.
I think the growth in restorative practice in the state, the Office of Restorative Practice, all the grants that are going out, the advisory, county advisory groups and that are going to provide some terrific opportunities for him. And they're looking for people with lived experience. So.
Would there be opportunities for him, since he's now at Lino, to participate in that capacity of mentor for Prison Fellowship Academy?
Yeah, it's harder, a little bit harder when you're on the outside and going in, because that's just tends to be a bit more challenging. Not that it's impossible, but that
yeah.
And there's a level of, there are a number of people who come out of prison fellowship that end up in minimum. So there can be a bit of that community connection that just exists more naturally in the minimum setting because of PFA being on the inside.
Mm-hmm. Well, can I amend your motion to say deny parole, continue on the track to parole with a presumptive review in 1 year, thinking he does some more time where he is right now in minimum, and then he goes to work release, and then we review on paper, or he could come back to see if he's ready for parole.
What would be the wishes of the board? Do you want to have him come in and see him and talk to him a year? Or would you want, I'm just by way of the motion here.
Yeah, I'd go with presumptive, but somebody can amend it if they feel strongly.
I would prefer longer if I'm being honest. And I say that not as some sort of arbitrary attempt to, extend the incarceration custodial status any longer than necessary. It's more so, I think the gravity of the change, and what those changes represent. I think it's just, and I have no reason to believe that he wouldn't be successful. It's just more time to make sure there aren't any sort of whatever, hiccups, just adjusting to that ongoing step down. Yeah, I am just more comfortable with a more with a longer step down. Doesn't need to be 5 years, but something a little bit longer than a year would be my preference. I'm only one board member.
Are you concerned about the Olmsted County community?
Absolutely. The That's absolutely a part of it, is the feedback from the law enforcement community, the prosecutor's office, like that's a real thing that, even statutorily, like it's one of the factors. So that's a thing for me.
Do you have any sense of like what would make you feel more comfortable around that side of it?
A year and a year. A year minimum, a year work release, come back. Come back before the board.
Well, so, okay, go ahead.
This gentleman has displayed to me a great capacity for positive change. And I'm much more encouraged about his rate of growth and change and contribution to the community. I'm real concerned about the rate of change among the law enforcement component that prosecuted him originally and their more static response. And I see a lot of opportunities available as gentlemen, opportunities to address to the static response of law enforcement and so forth. I don't see that even available right now. Or he could be one of the persons that might start breaking into that. But boy, that's a big mountain. So I'm saying, look, the opportunities are, I don't want him denied opportunities due to the permanence of other attitudes.
I will never, ever forget. I mean, I can remember even to this day, very, very minute details of how things looked and what I saw and how things smelled and what I did, what my partner, Deputy Mike Braley, did at the time. We actually made the comment after we came out and things kind of calmed down. We talked briefly that night and said, this is going to be the biggest case of our careers. And really, for me, it was true.
Well, can we just do I made a motion. Can we just see if it goes anywhere? And then if it doesn't, we start over?
So I just want to make sure, I just want to go back here and just figure out, did we have a motion in a second? I know you talked about it like a motion, but I don't think we had a second, did we?
Yeah.
We don't have a second.
Okay. Okay, so your motion then, Don, would be, are you withdrawing it? And then we'll move to Chris's, is that?
Your motion was amending yours.
Yeah, so just instead of, we'll just withdraw it because it was.
It's up to you.
Read the motion, help me with the motion right now. The motion that we understand, I'm not sure I understand what the motion is. I need to hear it.
Deny parole, continue for 1 year. We'll say with a review at the end of 1 year, where during that time, he progresses from minimum to work release.
So a year from now, he could be finished with work release.
It could be.
Is what I'm understanding.
It could be.
And I would go along with that.
And we're talking about he would come back in
I
for
think,
an
yeah,
in-person
I
review.
think so. Yeah.
Okay, so we basically continued for a year with a period of time spent in minimum and then moved to work release and then would be seen in a year, roughly that period of time.
I'll second it.
And there's a motion and a second. Any further discussion? The one thing I would just say is, and I say this having come out of spending almost 30 years in law enforcement and working on that side of it, and one of the things that I'm mindful of in this process is that, and I think even Mr. Brom noted this, is that along the way, people who are in the system end up being harmed by exposure to these incidents themselves. And I just will speak to that just on a personal level of spending as many years as I did doing what I did, that's a reality still for me. And
part of the objective that I had as a police officer and then police chief was at least the way the system that we have is set up is that success and is grounded oftentimes in system and accountability and punishment. And I'm not seeing this as but that was what it was. And I think it is a weird position even for me personally in some instances to have been on the law enforcement side, even with some cases that I've been involved with in this role. And then on this side of it. And so I just want to say that because I understand where law enforcement and prosecutors can oftentimes be in their response to these cases, and in particular cases that have such a pronounced community impact as well. That I get it, and I don't say that for any other reason but just to provide some context because.
I'd like to add to that, one of the things that struck me all along in this experience of 6 months is the trauma and trauma on all kinds of levels. And I think the vicarious and secondary trauma that police officers and people on the scene and what have you, that I think also impacts their perspective and approach is not, it's not, there's not an awareness of that. And I think I'd like to see us do more about all the trauma.
Thank you. Yeah. So anyway, just as long as we had the comments section here open.
Yeah, no, for sure. I don't think the DOC is in control of this, but that's why I asked the question about sitting down with law enforcement. Not that it would change anything, but that was, I can't remember if that was Mr. Brom's suggestion or somebody else.
It came up during the course of our last hearing.
Yeah, is that a possibility in all of this?
We open the door to that those options and go from there. But I think certainly, and I've had this conversation not just in this case, but just I'm talking about in general, where I've invited colleagues of mine from the police chief side and sheriffs to come in and participate in some of these conversations, and that's been helpful. Oftentimes, it's not a case that they were necessarily involved in, but we met with people who, were part of the circle that we heard of earlier in our conversation with Mr. Span. We hear about with Mr. Brom. Some of these folks who create that community that is very positive and wanting to move forward. And I think, those things need to continue because I think that's, it is one of the places that can be eye-opening. And I think it doesn't open a trauma door that, where people were directly involved in a case.
Well, could we proceed with the motion? I suspect it may get voted down and then somebody can make a new one.
Okay, so we have a motion, and to that motion, I'm going to do a roll call vote. Board Member Bray.
Yes.
Board Member Earhart abstains. Board Member Larson.
No.
Board Member Ramstead.
Yes.
Board Member Nelson.
Yes.
Board Member Struford.
Yes.
And Schnell will vote yes. So we have by a vote of 5-1, one abstention. The motion prevails. Mr. Braum, we will work with the staff there in terms of identifying kind of a timeline of what this looks like. We'll work with work release staff as well. Probably just if we look at, cutting this in half, you'd be looking at another, maybe it's 5 months there. We'll work with work release, and HRU will connect with Dan there and begin to work out a plan for that. And then we'd be seeing you sometime likely in January of next year. Any questions about that?
No.
Obviously, the standard expectations, remain discipline-free, which hasn't been a big problem, other than that one time when you had an extra person in your cell, as was noted.
So, and then, again, I would just say that, and you and I have talked about this, and I think the issue of, what we expect and what you, owe us to continue to do what you're doing in terms of investments in self, of living your best life, and the ways that that can affect others. So, we would certainly hope that and expect that that will continue. Any questions?
No, sir.
Okay, all right, good luck to you.
And I'm going to unpack this as best I can. Thankfully, I have Lady Holly to give me the notes. And this was a combined effort of Sir Richard and Lady Holly. And thank you so much for doing all of it, because it is a bit confusing, at least for me. But in a nutshell, what they did is that they said that they are going to move him to work release. That's my understanding. For 1 year, they're going to come back and see him, which actually at the time of this recording is in about 6 months. They're going to see him, and if all goes well, they'll parole him for good, parole him onto the street. And we'll go over the information of this case. We'll read through some of the facts, but just a few things I want to get off my chest. And that is, he murdered his family. He killed his father, his mother, his 2 siblings with an axe. They say that he struck them a total of 44 times. I mean, we have to let that reality sink in. Aren't there just some people that you cannot take a chance on? Aren't there some people that maybe there's something really broken in them? Not everybody has the right to live amongst us. And if that somebody is someone who murders their family with an axe, if they could get paroled, then who can't? Can it get more demonic? He can't even explain why. He blames it on depression. The records that we see here is that he was talking about killing his family for 6 months, his friends say. They say that he claimed that he did it because his father wouldn't let him listen to the music he wanted to listen to. He shows no remorse at his own parole hearing. He calls them as if they're a different family. And the reason he gives is, well, I might upset some people. Shut up. It just seems so disingenuous to me. Again, imagine the smells, the screams, the terror and shock in their eyes as one by one he slaughters his own family. And you're not going to shed a tear when you talk about it? Your voice isn't going to choke up. You're not going to show emotion. The only answer is that there's something wrong with you. It's so obvious. What makes you believe that he won't do this again? I'm not a doctor, right? I'm not diagnosing anyone, as Dr. Grande says. I'm just speculating on a situation like this. But there's got to be just one reason for him to have the inability to show empathy, and that would be because he cannot feel empathy. He can't even fake it. He can't even pretend to fake it. Maybe you give him credit for that. We're so used to seeing the fake cries. Maybe you give him credit for that. That's something I can hear that argument, actually. He doesn't care. He killed his family. Never lost sleep over it. Doesn't give a flying hoot. He's just he's wired that way. What can you blame him? At least he's not pretending. But I just gotta say, I mean, if I'm a parole board member, and this is only the second Minnesota parole hearing that we're covering, and it's going to take a while to get to the parole board members. Apparently, the head was in law enforcement for most of his life, and it's actually quite interesting. Lady Holly found the article. It was only until a year ago that this parole board didn't exist. It was only this man who was at the head of the parole board, and apparently he did it with the governor, and it was just the governor and this man that did all the and the law was changed, and I'll go over the article. So this is only a new thing for Minnesota that they have this parole board, that it's a process that we're accustomed to, like in Louisiana and Connecticut and Vermont and Iowa. And it is interesting that we've seen different members of the parole board sharing quite opposite opinions. Some very like, I don't even know why the police can't get over it. Oh, shame on them. I mean, gosh, they only had to walk into a house when they were just in their early 20s and see 4 brutally murdered people. You go over what it was like. Let me just go over what it was like for the law enforcement. Here's the article. So losing daylight at 5:23 p.m. I think that it's about that time. 6. This is coming from the police officer that came in there. This was his second year on the job. So I got out and I waited. He got out of his car and I said, well, here's what I got. I told him the stuff I already knew, announced ourselves, sheriff's office, and of course, nobody answered. At this point, with no one responding, that was a point where really now we got a bad deal here. I don't know how it's written like this. Torgerson goes on to explain heading into the bedrooms upstairs. So here he is going to the bedrooms upstairs, 2 years on the force. And when I got to the top of the step and where I could see up the floor, and that's when I saw what turned out to be both females, their feet lying there. Torgerson said, and I whispered then to my partner, we've got 2 bodies up here. 2 females. Did a quick peek and I remember looking left. It was quite a sight. You can hear his voice, the trained law enforcement officer's description of just the facts until he gets to the last bedroom. Think about this. Listen to this. So I walked in further, and then I got in just to the corner of that little entry of what was Ricky's room. He was lying in bed in a fetal position. This is the 9-year-old boy. And again, massive injuries to his head, multiple other injuries across his body, and he's laying there clutching a little blanket. This, as a father of a 9-year-old boy, I cannot understand. Let the police get over it. You don't get over this. And I think, the idea that this, I'm just going to call him this, a monster, cannot show empathy and express remorse and express pain in what he did with his own hands for no reason at all. Not that there could be a reason, but just he can't even, the thing is that even you would think that there'd be some insight. If this was a Louisiana hearing and we had the Louisiana parole board, I would just say, Miss Bonnie Jackson, I think she would want to know why did he do it, and they would not let him get off without really explaining it. Not just, well, I was depressed and I blamed it on them. That doesn't cut it. You've been locked up for how many years now? And that's what you come up with on your parole hearing? That's the insight that you have? This is not like you're getting parole because you were a dealer. You're getting parole because even you had a vehicular homicide, because maybe you even shot a man. But no, you murdered your family with an axe. He's been locked up 36 years. 41 years old, 40 years old, 14 years old, 9 years old. His oldest brother wasn't home. That's the only reason he had lived. And he knew what he was doing. He ran away and hid, by the way. There was a manhunt for him. They only caught him because he called his buddy from a payphone and said what he did. The buddy called the police and they went and got him. And then he showed no remorse in the court. And then, also what was interesting about this case, they bring up like you were diagnosed with schizophrenia or whatever. He's like, I have no idea why that diagnosis came about. And it's BS. That was his defense. His defense was saying that they brought in specialists to claim that's where he got his diagnosis from. And just like the way the board, like, oh yeah, I don't know. Isn't that cute? When he needs that as a defense to try to go to it, then it's convenient for him. But now when it's parole, I don't have any talking about. I don't care if you're 16 years old. When you do this, you clearly are broken. And where does it stop here? What are the different murder cases where we have? What was that kid who stabbed the boy who stabbed a girl like 100 times? We hear about these cases, and what was the name of that case? 114 times. Here it was, July of 2021. Bailey. When Bailey was murdered by that boy, and we hear he gets all these life sentences. He has no empathy. He did it for fun. We have to be naive to not think that he too will have a parole hearing one day. Because frankly, what's the difference between murdering one girl, stabbing her all those times, and killing your entire family with an axe? And this wasn't the first parole. We covered a parole hearing out of Illinois of a woman who killed her mother and father, and also like a 9-year-old brother with a knife, and out of Illinois. And she was denied parole. So isn't that interesting? What information more to share here? So let's go through this, and then I'll go through the Minnesota hearings and I'll let you go. But on October 3rd, 1989, Rochester, Minnesota jury gave David Braum, so he was 18 when he was finally convicted. Do I zoom in more? Okay. An unwelcome 18th birthday present. If it convicted him of 4 counts of first-degree murder. A week later, the same jury rejected Braum's claim that he was insane when he used 56 blows with an axe to murder his father, mother, and 2 siblings. He was subsequently sentenced to 3 consecutive life terms and 1 concurrent life term, and will be eligible for parole when he turns 70. Oh, well, what happened? He's now, right? The laws, they're just, After his sentencing, the judge reportedly retired to her chambers and wept. She wept over the tragedy of the crimes of David's wasted life, and something that I wonder if David had ever done. While extremely violent, David's crime is not that extraordinary. What is interesting is a dual legal issue that he raised, that crimes committed by a 16-year-old do not deserve to be tried as an adult court, and that Minnesota's based insanity defense is out of touch with reality and unfair. The defendant who are mentally ill while they commit their crimes. It says he was suppressed. Catholic sophomore, David had twice attempted to unalive himself. The last attempt was just a few months prior to the murders. The friends reported that he talked for 6 months about killing his family. For reasons never fully explained at the time, on February 18, 1988, in a gruesome crime scene, Cascade Township Police had been summoned to the home and found the bodies. 1490. Night clothes. The 4 were believed to have been slaughtered early in the morning. A bloody axe was found in the basement of the home. Authorities theorized that Bernard and Rick had been attacked first, and that the woman coming to investigate was subsequently struck down. What do you mean by woman? I don't know. What do you mean by that? The only member of the household not killed there was another brother who did not live at the home. The elder brother had an alibi, and David's palm prints were lifted from the murder weapon. Anyways. So here's the news where we'll go over Minnesota deciding to change up their system. So Minnesota Parole Board allows citizen members to decide who gets out of prison
Starting in July, a new citizen panel will decide which inmates serving life sentences are released and which stay in prison. This was written February 12, 2024. Okay, this is the man who sets who is talking, who's leading the board, right? So the Minnesota Department of Corrections will soon seek citizens to help with deciding who gets out of prison and who will remain locked up. Because of the 2023 change by the legislature, Correction Commissioner Paul Schnell will no longer make release decisions on his own. So up until this time, it was that man who was making decisions on his own. Isn't that interesting? I love just, you know, just how amazing it is in the US, where every 50 states, they all have their own system and you take certain things for granted. And it seems to quite make a lot of sense where there shouldn't be one man deciding, right, who gets out of prison. And they updated it. So that's good. Because it's going to change and the legislator shall no longer make release decisions on his own. Could you even imagine having to hold that? How could you even make decisions on your own? Starting in July, a new citizen panel will decide which inmates serving life sentences are released and which stay in prison. This has been one of the most incredible experiences in this job and parole responsibility, Schnell said. It's really brutally difficult, and yet I met some of the most incredible people. The idea behind the change is to have a broader group of Minnesotans who decide who is released rather than only the commissioner making the call. Schnell said the new approach will be more open and balanced, including appointees from both political parties. A simple majority of the panel will determine what happens with the release requests. I like this a lot. I really do. I think this is great. You know, and we did see a different flavor from the panel. We saw panels like, oh, who cares about the police? And the others like, I care a lot. This is a big deal. And this is why, you know. Until 1982, the State Board of Corrections decided who was paroled. That board was abolished, and the authority was vested in the commissioner. When he was appointed by Waltz 5 years ago, Schnell said he wasn't initially aware that the commissioner made the decisions on his own. That's not chaotic at all. I had no idea I'd make it on my own. One of the things that the governor and I talked about in this incredible responsibility, and perhaps this is one of those places where there should be a higher level of shared governance. Waltz said Wednesday that he supported the change as a way to bring experts and depoliticize the process. He will appoint members, but the legislative caucuses will make the recommendations. The board will handle requests from inmates serving mandatory minimum life sentences, most of them convicted of first degree. About 500 inmates are in the category, and by the way, we have many more parole hearings from Minnesota to cover. Holly has been hand-picking them. So we're going to show you really there's just a lot more. If you want it to see more of them, let me know in the comments section. That makes a big difference. And also there is a playlist now down below the Minnesota playlist if you want to see more from Minnesota. Under the current system, number of inmates granted release varied and climbed in recent years, and more inmates become eligible. Since 2019, Schnell had held 318 parole hearings and released 46 inmates. 46 of 318. What percentage is that? Let me ask. Well, I'm just curious. 46. What percentage is 46 of 318? What percentage is 46 of 318? I'm asking Grok. That is 14.4. Wow. So he denied 85%. Wow. Okay. Before him, Commissioner Tommy Rell held 270 hearings with 51 inmates. Roy served under the governor in 2018. You know, this is again the thing about Minnesota, right? It has a reputation, which I think rightfully so, for being light on crime or whatnot. But parole boards are often very different. Illinois is pretty tough on crime when it comes to their parole boards, and you don't think of that when it comes to the law and order. So Commissioner Joan Fabian served under the GOP and Tim Commissioner. Okay. I think that's it. I think we're done. I'll put links in the description. But there you have it. He'll come back in a year. We'll cover the hearing. We'll see what happens. I can't imagine they'll do anything but grant. And hey, we can agree to disagree. We're not an echo chamber. But I cannot get over the fact if you are so broken that you can do it, I just do not understand why you would take a chance on someone like that, because if he goes and harms and kills someone else, like it's like, how can you be surprised? how could you be surprised that that might happen? And with that, I'll let you go.
If you've lived in Rochester long enough, you've heard the name.
This is him on his way to prison. This is the last time Rochester saw him.
Brom. You've probably read the headlines.
5 lives that are gone. I mean, they're literally gone.
Remember the reports.
The question Olmsted County authorities must decide now is whether to charge David Braum as a juvenile or as an adult.
And watch the Braum family murder story play out on national television.
Good evening. Topping tonight's News 11. Police charge a 16-year-old boy with 4 counts of first-degree murder after his family is found axed to death in their Rochester home.
Patty Price lived it.
It was a crazy, awful experience.
In the middle of the night on February 18th, 1988, 16-year-old David Braum killed 4 of his family members. His parents, Bernard and Paulette, and younger siblings, 14-year-old Diane and 9-year-old Rick, all murdered with an axe.